How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another installment of Tech Support Thursday. Why does the camera look like it's kind of jacked up? That's because somebody bumped it. Anyway, a lot of passers-by in the office. Matter of fact, I go behind the camera. That doesn't look right. Anyway, I'll scoot over this way here more. Anyway, so another installment of Tech Support Thursday. Trying to get these done on Thursday, and for the most part. So what we're going to go do in this video is we're going to, like we normally do, we're going to read through the comments, the questions, and things like that, and then we are going to post video responses to them, and all that good stuff that goes along with it. If there's like I say in most of my videos when it comes to this type of stuff, if there is something you have a question on, you see something in the video and you want clarification, like I might have done something that you wouldn't have done, or whatever the case might be. You see something and you want to bring it to my attention, whether it's a comment, a question, whatever the case might be, drop a comment in the comment section below. I do see them. I see every comment, and I do my best to respond to the majority of them and things like that. Sometimes I might have to sit there and go look something up, but I do my best. So I am a one-man band. So with that being said, I am going to go through and talk about some of the questions we have here and go from there. There was one question that I got through. There's been some questions about the workbook. I haven't done any updates to it yet. I've been really busy with trying to get the service provider workbook going and trying to figure out some of that. Plus, my work schedule got kind of busy and I had to do some traveling. So I haven't had a chance to do that. Truth be told, once I dropped it, I've been letting it sit. And sometimes you just need to completely abandon something for a little while and then circle back once you have some time to do it. So with that being said, it is a work in progress. So we're going to go ahead and get into this. So I actually like this comment. Let's just leave sometimes tech support, which is very true when it comes to, I didn't release it till Thursday. I guess that's when I was available. The other question was, could you please clarify regarding workbook? It's not clear what is configured between R11, R12, Switch 17, R26, and R27. There are no initial configurations for Switch 17, 26, and 27. And initial config for R11 and 12 doesn't have config for interface gig 3, which connected to Switch 17. I can figure out initial configuration from the diagram, but there are no IP addresses for that segment on the diagrams as well. Could you please update the workbook and the configs? So that was basically for IPv6 Slack and DHCP-v6. I tried doing it on the switches, so the 4 PCs that are in the workbook and in the diagram. That was I changed the icon and just had a layered ISV L2 switch is what I was using for that. The other piece to that is that I had to throw in some routers to make them act like hosts so that I could get stuff to work. That is why it's set up the way that it is. So I'm not sure if that was clear in the workbook. So I didn't really see the need to configure anything on those interfaces outside of the actual IPv6 config. So that's why that's there. So I'll probably update that. It's just one of those things where I just haven't gotten around to it. I have a question. As far as I understand, pre-recorded videos on YouTube are UDP unicast, correct? What about YouTube's live stream? On one hand, it's live stream, so one could think should be UDP multicast. But in other hand, while you're watching live stream on YouTube, you can rewind and watch what was before. So it makes me think that live streams on YouTube are also UDP unicast. What do you think? So you won't see multicast outside of an environment where multicast is enabled at the platform level and at the interface level, because you need to be able to build multicast tunnels between all the devices. That's what PIM is for, Protocol Independent Multicast. So in order for that to work, you need to, because the way that multicast works in the background and versus unicast is if I have a file of whatever type it might be on a device that I want to be able to share out to people, that's going to be a unicast communication because I can have multiple people access that same file at the same time, and then each time that file is downloaded or copied or whatever the case might be, then it's an individual flow, right? So if you have 100 people trying to access that file at the exact same time, there's going to be 100 separate flows for that particular file transfer. Where in a multicast feed, you could present the file once, allow multiple people to log in and access it, but it's sent at one time. So that's where if you're doing anything on the internet is not multicast aware. So things that are right over the internet are, like if you're doing some sort of overlay tunneling with, say, DMVPN or IPsec VPNs and things like that, you can run multicast over those. However, when you look at it from a high level, the internet does not do multicast. The internet does unicast. So that's one of those key things is even if you're local to, let's say, I live in the Milwaukee area, so if, let's say there's a CDN for YouTube in Chicago, and I'm watching that, so the closest YouTube distribution point that I would be connecting to and watching is in Chicago, which is about an hour and a half south of me. So if I'm watching YouTube, I'm going to the Chicago data centers in order to watch it. Now, if you're in Minneapolis, or if you're on the west side of Wisconsin, let's say you're in La Crosse or Eau Claire, you might be going to the Minneapolis data centers. So you're going to go to the closest point in where that goes. The key thing is that's Anycast, right? You're going to go to the closest node that has the device, the closest node that's sourcing the material you're trying to watch. That's different than multicast, right? So if I'm going to be on a corporate network and I want to be able to do a feed of that type. So the most common, there's two common applications that I see for multicast being used. The first one is going to be distribution of information, which is going to be, I worked with a hospital system a while back, and there was a multicast feed that was done where the feed was sent from a server in a data center, and then the traffic was replicated out to the rest of the network. Now, the key thing here with that is that that particular feed was a single source of information being presented. So it was just streamed to everybody. If you logged into that application, you got the feed. That was the basic premise behind that. The other one is video feeds. Things like that where you're going to be sending traffic out. But anything that goes over the internet is strictly unicast or replicated unicast because you can't run multicast over transport that's not enabled for it. Simple as that. The other question that came in here was, I'm thinking about building a home lab ACI fabric. The cheapest combination I found was for the leaf switches 93108 TCEX or 9348 GCFXPs. So I'm assuming just two leafs and then a single spine 9336 PQ. APIC can just be a virtual machine. I know there's a simulator, but there's no data plan in the simulator, and he knows that. I have access to ACI fabric at work, but I love building. What say you? I gave my response that I had the exact same thought. So I know the guy personally that wrote the ACI workbook, or it is it this book? Yes, I have the book. I know the author personally. If you look it up, I'm not going to name drop here, but he's an ACI expert. So I brought that up to him when I was looking. Oh, I see what's happening. It's off center. I was like, why does that look funny to me? That's better. Now I'm centered. I don't have to be all the way over here. Anyway, so I brought that up to him when I was working with him, and I said, hey man, I want to build an ACI fabric. I was just going to go buy some equipment off eBay, and then, I don't want to say there's going to be a physical APIC. I don't want to just shoot from the hip and just hope it's going to work and spend, a couple $1,000s. And he looked at me and he goes, not going to work. And I'm like, well, okay. So there's some things behind the scenes that I don't know, and he just kind of gave me the heads up that it's not going to work the way you want it to. There's a certificate thing. So I actually worked with him a while back on a customer deployment. We were both in Nashville at the time, and we spent the majority of our time working on getting the fabric just to see each other. So the apic could discover the leaves, and then the leaf would discover the spine would discover the other leaf, and you'd be able to discover the fabric, and then you'd be able to bring that fabric into apic, and then you'd be able to start working with the fabric, doing your bridge domains, your tenants, your VRFs, all that type of good stuff. So the we ended up having to call TAC because the certificate was out of date and the certificate had to be reissued, and there's a bunch of rigmarole on the back end. It's been like 5 years, if I remember correctly. It's been like 5 years since I've seen that process happen. So it took a while. He was able to get it resolved, but it was just one of those things where he ran into a problem and he had to resolve it. So I don't recommend you doing this. I don't know if APIC can just be a virtual machine. I have no idea. I've never dug into it, but if if you can get it to work, great. Let me know. But I would hate for anyone to spend a lot of money on some hardware that eventually is just going to be a boat anchor. So don't do that. So the question was, I've been struggling with CCNP's SP core since the beginning of December. Even though I've been working in networking field for around 3 years, going to RIPE meetings, and been graduated a master's in networking and security, it's hard to get a good grasp on what I know and don't know. I took the IP specialist book, which is the only SP core exam guide out there. It's not as good as I would have hoped. Would not recommend it as reading material. I used the BGP from theory to practice book as well. It's quite satisfactory. I'm trying to lab up all the configuration parts of the exam, but I spent way too much time on... Where'd it go? Read more. Okay. Too far. I spent way too much time on automation skills using Norner and Napalm. Okay. And I'm already quite knowledgeable on Ansible. So I'm kind of deviating too much from SP Core exam that I have planned at the end of February. I'm planning to postpone it by a couple of weeks. It's just this exam is a lot of self-study and trying to find the right materials, unlike the enterprise track, for example. Also, I have mixed feelings on the test exam questions out there. They differ quite a lot. I thought I'd share my opinion on the SP Core preparation. Okay, so this one is kind of it's kind of challenging because of the fact that the service provider is a niche track out of the gate, no matter how you want to look at it. It's still a big track because of the fact that there's service providers run the internet, right? So if we were to take a quick field trip over to Cisco's website and then look at service provider, and then we'll scroll down here to SP Core, and what I'm looking for is the exam topics. So obviously this is, if you want to know what you need to study, this is obviously the thing. So we have architecture, and then we have networking, and then we have, so it's going to be BGP, OSPF, IS, redistribution, high availability, MPLS and segment routing. So obviously you need to know a lot about MPLS, traffic engineering, and then segment routing. Then you need about your services, VPN services through eVPN, inter-AS VPN, carrier and multicast VPN, layer 2 VPN and carrier Ethernet, so E-line, E-tree, E-access, E-LAN, and then your other capabilities for basically it's multi-chassis link aggregation, 802.1 AD and AH, Ethernet, OAM, and VLAN tag manipulation, being able to rewrite tags and things like that. Intra-AS VPN, shared services, extranet, internet, multicast services, PIMs, source-specific multicast, and bidirectional PIM. And then IGMP V1, V2, V3, which I'm funny because nobody runs V1. And then you have your automation and assurance. So obviously there's some stuff in here too So with all that being said, this is the blueprint, which is actually kind of interesting because there's two different ways that I would attack this, and this is actually how I'm attacking it currently. So what I'm doing, because of the way that this is laid out, is this. Let me go ahead and pull up, where is the PDF? Okay, so I have 3 different PDFs that I've got pulled up, and I've bought these books, I've downloaded these books, and I use them on a regular basis whenever I'm studying. So for the first part of the exam, you're talking about architecture. Architecture is going to be a lot of you Googling things to try to understand how they work. That's really what it comes down to. So what I would recommend you do for this piece right here is I personally have a subscription to Orhan Ergon. And if I was to pull this over here real quick, so I'm just going to bring this over. So this is what I'm currently going through. Now I'm not going to play anything because out of respect for Orgon's work, but I'm going through the CCDEV3 training. Now what's cool about this, if I scroll down here, he covers a lot of different things in his CCDEV3 training, and I like it because it's on demand. I can watch it whenever I want. So he goes through a lot of these things, right? And I forget where it is. Is it transport? Service provider transport technologies. So the things that you see right here, right, with the core architectures, transport technologies, optical, DSL, DOCSIS, TDM, XPON, he covers those exact same concepts here in that particular area. And if you still are like, well, I'm not really sure, whatever, you're gonna have to Google stuff, especially when it comes to this particular section right here. The other stuff in here, it's going to be a lot of what is this particular thing. You'll have to do some research on it, especially architecture, because it is design related. You're going to have to be able to answer those questions. So that's where that comes into play. For the implementing ISIS, V4, V6, OSPF version 2, version 3, BGP, implementing it, route RPLs and route maps, routing protocols, IPv6 transition, all that type of. So the main pieces here, and then high availability is going to be this book right here. The IP routing on iOS, XE, and XR. If you want to know about routing protocols on iOS and XR that cover a lot of stuff, as you can see here, I'm going through it myself. You got this book here. It's going to cover all the routing protocols. And then it goes through, if we come down here, it goes through BGP. Then it does cover multicast, which is good. It covers IPv6. And then down at the bottom here, it covers high availability. And it also covers multicast into the depth that you're going to need it. So that's where I would be focusing my time and effort for IP routing. So if you want a good book, that's where I would start. Now, let's go back over here. We come over here to MPLS and segment routing. MPLS, if you want to deep dive into MPLS, the other book is going to be the CCIE SPB4 Comprehensive Guide. It's a little pricey. I forget what Nick has the price point set out on LeanPub, but I bought this book a long time ago. I've had it forever. I'm currently using it to study traffic engineering, and because of the fact that there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to traffic engineering. So this is definitely what I would put my time and effort into if you're trying to learn how the technology works. Nick goes into a lot of detail, like ridiculously deep detail on how this works. He goes into the debugs, and you can understand how the trees are all built. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail right now because it would be kind of a waste of time. But that's really where you get into it. I would definitely say that you get kind of an abbreviated blueprint for CCIE, but at the end of the day, it's the same stuff, right? Now, going back over here to VPN services, he covers this as well. He covers all of these things right here. Automation and assurance. So like SNMP-v3, NetConf, NetFlow, IPFix. Let's see here. Some of the stuff is going to be isn't specific to automation, but other stuff is. So in my opinion, if you're going to be wanting to learn how any of this stuff works, I'm going to kick you back over here to Nick when it comes to Pluralsight. He has a lot of really good content on that type of stuff. So if I was you and that's something you're actually wanting to dig into, those are going to be the things that you're going to want to put your time and effort into. And you're going to have to Google foo yourself through some of the stuff, because you're right, there is no book. Now, I am doing everything I can to put together training for this that'll cover, that it's not going to be CCNP or CCIE specific. You know, it's not a deep dive into the technology of. It's not going to be Nick's book. It will be just like the Enterprise Workbook, where it'll be covering the majority of the topics. Just about anything I can lab up, I will definitely be labbing up and putting in the workbook. But the idea is, as I'm going through and doing the training, it's going to be a known good configuration on a particular capability. This is how you would do X, Y, Z. And if you do that correctly, things are going to work out for you. And so far they've come together, but it's going to be it takes time. It's one of those things where you just have to go through it. Service provider is one of those tracks where you really have to take your time. At least I've had to take my time. If you were to think, I'm thinking back to where I had to log into Cisco's website to see the last time I took a service provider exam at the CCNP level. I think it was 7 years ago. So it's one of those things where you just have to take your time and go through the details of what's going on there, and then start Googling the crap out of stuff to figure out how it works. So if you're already good with Ansible, hey man, more power to you. So although the automation piece is a small portion, everything else is a bigger section. So it's equal to architecture. So if you take that into comparison, if they ask you 95-ish questions, 15% of those questions are going to be around automation. So if you do some math, that's probably what, 10, maybe 11. Same thing with architecture. So, but I don't know if that's going to be the only thing they talk about. Anyway, that's basically how I would handle that. Now, me personally, if you're looking at doing anything beyond that, I don't know if you have any interest in doing CCIE, but I do, and I'm actually kind of double barreling between service provider and CCDE, which is a reason why I'm going through Orhan's content. It's really, really good stuff. He's really, really knowledgeable, and it's actually a really good refresher for me to go through and make sure I understand what's going on. So if you can splurge a little bit to gain access to the content, I think it's definitely worth your time and effort. So hopefully that answers your question, and I can point you in the right stuff, or in the right direction. Awesome stuff. Thank you. So glad I came across your channel. 451. You show 6 possible NICs for large vSphere installs. Do admins generally need to add more NICs to their servers? Now, in most cases, what I've seen is 4 NICs. So you'll bond them together, and you'll have 2 switches upstream of each other, and the switches themselves will be in like a VPC or a multi-chassis VSS, and then you'll have those 4 connections will come down. They'll be bundled into one big port channel, and you'll be able to load balance all over all 4 10 gig NICs in most cases, 25 depending on the deployment. More than likely in modern deployments, 25 gig. And if you can get them there, sometimes you'll see 100, but I've seen a lot of 10, and I'm starting to see more and more 25. So that's where that kind of stuff comes into play. So now you can go more. Now, and the reason why I show 6 possible NICs is because I wanted to have a NIC per traffic type. That's really what I was trying to get away with. But in reality, you don't normally see that. It's possible, but it's not normally the reason people do that. Now you can, in older versions of certain things, there used to be, you need a dedicated NICs for NSXT versus because it had deployed its own VDS, things like that. But now that everything has been optimized and things like that, where you would be able to install NSX into the VDS bits itself, you wouldn't have to do that. So it gets kind of interesting. So with that being said, that's basically where that comes into play. If you have any questions, let me know. I have another question, if you don't mind. On APIC, I want to import post one JSON file that contains multiple L3 out configs, which basically just is it's a layer 3 interface. So far, I can only figure out how to post a JSON file one L3 out at a time. Yes, I have TAC and I have an ACI engineer helping out, but I think he's overloaded, blah, 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 blah. I've read this, and I redirected him to somebody that might be able to help. Hopefully that will. More horror stories from the data center, please. Apparently, that guy liked that. Horror story. Let me think here for a second. Do I have any horror stories to tell? I won't. Not horror stories. Let me think. I mean, I've done a lot of dumb stuff. I think the last thing that I did that caused an outage, and I only talk about it because of the fact that I try to learn from my mistakes. I was working with a healthcare customer with another engineer, and we were both working to try to get traffic to flow a particular direction based off of a failover scenario. And as we had walked through it, we realized that we needed to do some adjustments. So we had Nexus 9Ks here, and we had Palo firewalls here. They were both eBGP peer to each other, and I was going to create a route map that would do an AS path prepend and on a specific set of subnets. And by accident, because of the fact that it wasn't a planned change, I hadn't looked at the config ahead of time. I created a route map with a single sequence number in it, and matched that route map to a prefix list with a handful of subnets in it. And what ended up happening was those subnets were passed, but the drawback to that was everything else got dropped because there wasn't a sequence number that was just a permit IP any, allowing everything else, but don't make any modifications to the routes. And he was looking at the Palo firewall, and I could see his screen, and I go, that sounds like it looks like a really low number. And then he goes, yeah, I'm missing a whole bunch of routes. It's been a while since I remember this, but I knew exactly what the problem was as soon as he said that. I went back over to the route map and I added an additional sequence number. So I did like route map, whatever it was, permit 20, and hit the enter key. And as soon as I did, he refreshed it, and then all the routes came through. So it was one of those things where I don't ever recommend people make changes on the fly, especially when you're not sure exactly what to do. I am a much greater proponent of let's pause and figure out what's going on, and if we need to regroup, we need to regroup. But so the outage was short, but it was an outage nonetheless. So I ended up having to answer for that, and it was my fault. I took responsibility for it. And so needless to say, even though I brought down, as far as I remember, it was internet connectivity went down, but it was after hours at a location that I don't believe anybody was at. So in the grand scheme of things, actually I take that back. Maybe there were. I don't remember. It's like I said, it's been a while since I worked on this particular project, but now that I think back to it, I think that I might have broken something internally, but then it was fixed before anybody really could say anything. But again, it's one of those things where don't make changes on the fly unless you know exactly what it is you need to go do. So I'm very cautious on how I do things, and it's different to make those changes in a lab, where if you break something, you can go, oh, okay, and then go fix it, and then no harm, no foul. But when you're potentially breaking something or causing an outage somewhere, that's the last thing as any network engineer, that's the last thing you want to do. So that would be a horror story, something I definitely would never do again. And, it's one of those things where it stands out in my mind because of the fact that it was something I broke. So, but it's one of those things where, if you can't learn from your mistakes, then the lesson wasn't that valuable. Thanks for uploading this content. Sure, no problem. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Looking forward to this one day. Great material to refresh my memories and to get to know some new stuff. Please keep on going. I don't know if you already fixed it later in the videos, but I think you accidentally add the Wi-Fi VLAN as the voice VLAN. It's possible. I mean, I'm going kind of fast, so it's possible that I might have typoed. Is the CLI of a DEXA switch hands-off, or can you make changes in CLI if switch is managed by NDFC? So you can still access it. The CLI is still reachable, so you can still SSH into it or come in over the out of band management interface. All that stuff still works. However, configuration changes should not be made on NDFC through the. Or sorry, configuration changes on the switch itself should not be made unless you're done using it with the NDFC. NDFC Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller is a GUI that replaced DCNM, Data Center Network Manager, to manage your VXLAN fabrics. It did more than that, but that was the most common deployment I've ever seen it used for. So the idea is actually very simple. There's a lot of configuration that goes into deploying VXLAN, and it's one of those things where you really need to know how VXLAN works under the hood, where you can, if you need to learn it quickly, NDFC is a great way to do that, because as you're deploying, it's going to show you all the config. So because of that, it's one of those things where it's good to learn, as good as a learning tool from that respect. So I have worked with several customers over time where they went through and they used DCNM or NDFC or whatever it is. NDFC is a little bit more complicated to get working, but DCNM was easier operationally, but NDFC was trying to optimize things and make stuff kind of like a one-stop shop, stuff like that. But anyway, one thing that we ended up doing, I worked with several customers where they wanted to deploy a VXLAN fabric. A lot of them wanted to get away from ACI for whatever reason. So they would move away from ACI over to regular manual VXLAN. They'd use NDFC or DCNM to discover the switches and then get the fabric deployed. And then they would deploy a handful of VLANs and a VRF and all that type of stuff and get connectivity outgoing. And we would set up the layer 3 out on the VRF Lite, BGP peering into the upstream connectivity, usually firewalls, things like that. So you can still access the CLI, but if you're not planning on using NDFC or DCNM anymore to manage the switch, then you can make all the CLI changes you want. However, it's not like FTD, where if you're running, FTD on, and then you have so the last customer I worked with had ASA firewalls running FTD code, and they were being managed by the ASDM. So you could log into the ASA, but you couldn't make any configuration changes because it was like FTD. It was kind of a weird paradigm. As a matter of fact, the security engineer that I was working with made a comment that he's just like, this doesn't make any sense. They're running ASAs, they were running FTD boxes, if I remember, 2104s. They were in 2104s. 2104s, I could be wrong on the number because it's been a while since I've done this. And then they had ASA code running on it, and then they would log in to the ASA through the ASDM because they didn't have CLI access to make changes. They could only view the CLI from a verification perspective, show this, show that. They couldn't go into global config and make a configuration change on the ASA. So that was like, that's kind of weird. But anyway, I digress. So in that particular case there, it's not like if you're running FTD and you're running the FDM, or FMC, managing the box, and you only have access to view the outputs. You can't actually make any. It's a read-only CLI. With this one, it would still be a read-write CLI, but like I said, a lot of customers, they would simply go through and make whatever changes that they needed to make, and everybody would be happy. So that's essentially where that would come into play. Great videos and good examples. Thank you for the video. And wow, it's such a pleasure to have you, that you answered my question in video. You are welcome. So that is pretty much it for this Tech Support Thursday. I'll get this one out and upload it here rather quickly. So again, if you guys have any questions on any videos, comments, concerns, feedback, drop that sucker in the comment section below. I have only had one person lately get kind of snarky with me, and I was just like, you know, I'm putting out the videos for free, so you get my knowledge for free in the videos, and then I create a workbook at a, I would consider a nominal fee. You know, people I know think I should be charging $100 for the enterprise workbook. I don't think that's, I think that's a little too high. But that's just my opinion, and I wrote it, so I can price it whatever I want to. You guys have been awesome with the support for the workbook, and I am working on some updates for that, of what I want to go do. Like navigation, I didn't do it before I released the workbook because I wanted to get it done. But one thing I plan on doing is having a bookmark that goes back up to wherever you came from. So almost like a back button in a web browser. But instead of, you'd have, you know, you could click back and it would take you to the lab you were just on. So you're not having to scroll up and down trying to find the lab you were just on. So that's one thing I'm working on, and I want to do some updates. There was some stuff that came out that I was just like, oh, I'm sure we can do that. Anyway, that is what we got going on. So I want to thank everybody for their continued support on the workbook and all that good stuff. And yeah, so that's pretty much what I got going on. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feedback, drop that in the comment section below. There will be a link for both the sample workbook and for the Patreon link to that. If you are interested in taking a look at it, be my guest. So with that being said, until next time, guys, you guys take it easy and have a good one.